Hello, my name is Ása and this is the course Lærum Íslensku or Let's Learn Icelandic, and today we're going to start to tackle the Icelandic adjectives. So the lesson today is actually quite important, and before we start I just want to recommend that you first, if you haven't already, look up these episodes. Okay, so first look at the episode where we talk about the greinir or the Icelandic the. Also go through the personal pronouns and also the verb to be. I think if you cover these three first, you will get much more out of this lesson. So today's topic is Icelandic adjectives, okay? And just to warn you, Icelandic adjectives are not easy, but we'll just take it one step at a time, and then each step will not be so difficult, I hope. I'm going to start with adjectives that have the ending legur. Legur, okay? And there's a reason for this. And the reason is, first of all, there are very many Icelandic adjectives that end with legur. I would guess that around 20-30% of the adjectives that we use most frequently end with legur. And it might be slightly more or slightly less, but I think it's roughly around this range. Which means that there's a lot of adjectives that end with legur, and this is good news for people who want to study Icelandic, because all the Icelandic grammar, it only happens to the end of the words. So basically all the adjectives that end with legur follow exactly the same grammar. Exactly the same grammar when we change them because of genders, we change them because of case, we do all these different things that you can do with the adjectives. It all goes exactly the same. And another fantastic thing about the legur adjectives is that they are perfectly regular. Okay, so no irregularities. They are perfectly regular. For this reason, I think it's very important and very useful if you learn the legur adjectives very well. Okay, first of all, because all the rules that you will learn will apply to so many adjectives, so you will learn so much only for learning these simple rules. But also it will help with other adjectives. Okay, so unfortunately Icelandic adjectives don't always act exactly the same, but it's similar, let's say. So if you have like the legur adjectives here in the beginning, then you have another group of adjectives that deviate slightly from legur in a certain way, and then another group of adjectives that maybe deviate slightly from the legur adjectives but in a different way. So if you have this foundation of the legur adjectives and you know them really well, and you know them to the point that they're sort of intuitive and you don't have to think, then my theory at least is that it will be easier to learn the other adjectives if you just use this sort of an anchor to keep you sane, let's say. So first of all, what does it mean, this legur ending of the adjectives? It's not completely trivial to translate it directly, but the meaning is something similar to like. Okay, so what do I mean by this? I will explain. Let's take, for example, the adjectives ungur. Okay, the adjective ungur means young, but then there also exists an adjective that is called unglegur. Unglegur. And this means that you're young-like, sort of. And it can either mean that you look incredibly young, like from appearance point of view, but it can also mean that you're young in spirit. It's like you're young-like. It doesn't have to mean that you are actually young, but you're young-like in some aspect. In a similar way, elli means old age. Old age, so it's a noun, old age, that is called elli. And then we have the adjective ellilegur. Okay? Ellilegur. And this means that you're sort of like old like or old age like. So if you say to somebody that he is ellilegur, that means that he looks old typically. So this is sort of what the legur ending means, and then you can imagine that it's naturally used to describe a lot of things. For those of you who know other languages, this is this analogous to when you say dejlig in Danish, like dejlig. And I think also in German you can say something like wunderlich, wunderlich, and this lich ending I think is equivalent to the Icelandic legur. In any case, legur is very widely used, so if you learn them well, you take a big step into becoming better at Icelandic. Okay, so let's just start with the singular form of the adjectives, and I will take skemmtilegur as an example, but basically all the adjectives will act in the same way, and I will show you more examples. I will show you a lot of examples in this lesson to hope to drill it into your head how these work. But we will start with skemmtilegur, and skemmtilegur means fun or entertaining. The English translation is not perfect, but it's the same as show in Danish, and then divertido in Spanish, and divertente in Italian. So it means like somebody that's fun to hang out with, but it can also be like a movie that is fun to watch, something like this. So let's start with a positive adjective, and the word is skemmtilegur. Okay, in the male form we have a guy who's very fun to hang out with. We say hann skemmtilegur. Hann skemmtilegur. And you notice that skemmtilegur in the male singular form is the same version that I have been talking about, and that is because the dictionary form of every adjective is actually the male singular, because that's how the universe works. But basically the male singular version is the version that you will find in the dictionary. So I might call this the dictionary form from time to time. So when you're talking about one male object or one male person, you will say hann skemmtilegur. Hann skemmtilegur. Then if we want to talk about female, we drop the ur. Okay, so we drop the ur, and then we have the root of the word, and that is skemmtileg. Skemmtileg. And so we say hún skemmtileg. Hún skemmtileg. Okay, so now this is the root of the word. So basically this is the part of the word that doesn't really change. This is sort of the foundation of the word, if you will. And then when we want to make the version in the neutral form, then we add a T to the root of the word, okay? And then we say hán skemmtilegt. Hán skemmtilegt, or það skemmtilegt. Það skemmtilegt. So let me read once through it. Hann skemmtilegur, hún skemmtileg, hán skemmtilegt, and það skemmtilegt. Okay. So basically the dictionary form is the male form, the female form is the root of the word, and then the neutral version you put T at the end of the root of the word. Okay, so this is quite simple because this applies to all the adjectives that end with legur. They will be exactly the same in these different forms. Unfortunately, that's not completely true about all other adjectives, but today we're only talking about the legur adjectives, so let's just focus on those. Okay, so let me give you some more examples. We can also have people who are not fun to hang around with, and then the word is leiðinlegur. Leiðinlegur, and this means either boring or somebody who is not nice to you, typically. So now let's form some sentences using this new word. Then we can, for example, say maðurinn leiðinlegur, konan leiðinleg og barnið leiðinlegt. Okay, barnið leiðinlegt. Then if we try one more example, we can also use the word fallegur. Fallegur, and fallegur means beautiful. And then we can say, for example, þetta fallegur maður. Þetta fallegur maður. This is a beautiful man. Or þetta falleg kona. Þetta falleg kona. Or finally, þetta fallegt barn. Þetta fallegt barn. Okay, so hopefully now everyone understands the singular. So let's just move on to the plural. And the good news about the plural is that the plural is almost always sort of regular. Okay, at least a lot more than the singular version. So how do you say? Let's use the same word as before, just so you have it in all versions. Okay, so if we have a couple of men and they are extremely fun to hang out with, then we say þeir eru skemmtilegir. Þeir eru skemmtilegir. So here we add ir to the root of the word. Okay, so the root of the word is skemmtileg, and then we add ir as an ending. Þeir eru skemmtilegir. Þeir eru skemmtilegir. Then when we're talking about a couple of women that are extremely fun and delightful to hang out with, then we say þær eru skemmtilegar. Þær eru skemmtilegar. Then now we're adding ar to the root of the word. Okay, ar to the root of the word. And then finally, when you have two neutral things or two non-binary persons, then you say something like þau eru skemmtileg. Þau eru skemmtileg. And you don't add any ending to the root. And note here that the female singular form and the neutral plural form is the same. And this is always the same, or at least almost always the same. At least now I cannot remember as an example where it's not the same, but at least almost always, possibly always, the female singular form and the neutral plural form is the same of the adjectives. Okay. And this is actually kind of funny because when I was, I don't know if I should call it learning, let's say learning German, then it surprised me then that you have the three articles. You have der, die, das, and then for the plural you have the same article as in the female form. So if you have something plural and you're using the definite article like the in English, then you say die, which is the same as you have for the female. And I remember when I was studying this, I was like, why is the plural anything like the female form? That is ridiculous and doesn't make any sense. And then I took a better look at my own language. I was like, we kind of do it too, but in the neutral form. So maybe there's some connection there, and that's just how it ended up in German. I mean, I don't think this is a coincidence, but basically remember this: female singular form, and the neutral plural form in the adjectives is almost always the same. However, this only applies in the nominative. Now we're only talking about the nominative, let's forget about the other cases, but in the nominative, this is always or almost always the rule. Now let's pick up some examples. What can we do? Okay, we can use, for example, the word duglegur. Duglegur. And duglegur means like hardworking or industrious, like somebody who does really a lot of things. And this can either be like actually at work or just in your hobbies or whatever you want. Just if you're like hardworking and you're not lazy, it's basically the opposite of being lazy, I would say. Okay, and then we would say mennirnir eru duglegir. Mennirnir eru duglegir. Konurnar eru duglegar. Konurnar eru duglegar. And finally, börnin eru dugleg. Börnin eru dugleg. And let's do one final example with the plural. Let's use the word alvarlegur. Alvarlegur, which means serious. So if you're a serious person or serious situation or whatever, then we would use the word alvarlegur. And then you could say þetta eru alvarlegir menn. Þetta eru alvarlegar konur. And finally, þetta eru alvarleg börn. Then of course you can mix and match the adjectives and say something like hún leiðinleg en hann skemmtilegt. Okay? Or you could say þær fallegar og duglegar. Okay? Or þeir fallegir en leiðinlegir. Okay. So basically you can use and mix and match and all of this. So a final note, in this lesson we only talked about the nominative, okay? We haven't touched the other cases, but of course all these 6 versions have 4 cases, okay? And we've only covered 1, but that's enough for today, 1 step at a time and all of that. Then there is another issue. Okay, so today I have used 3 forms of sentences. I've either used hann fallegur, maðurinn fallegur, or þetta fallegur maður. Okay, and there's a reason for why I have sort of limited myself to these 3 sentences or these 3 forms of sentences. And that is, first of all, if we start to add different verbs, then we will have to deal with more cases than just the nominative, so that's why I'm sticking with the verb to be for now. And then there's another form that I have avoided at the moment, and this is putting the adjective next to a word with a greiner, next to a word with a definite article. And the reason for this is that we have both a strong form of the adjective, which is what we have learned now today, but we also have a weak form of the adjective. So if the adjective stands next to the word with the greiner, then you would have to use the weak form. And the weak form you don't know yet. One example of this is when I talked about the Icelandic greetings in episode 17, I think. Then we saw 2 versions to say good evening. Then you would say gott kvöld, okay, gott kvöld if there's no article, but then you would say góða kvöldið, góða kvöldið, when there is the article. Okay, the good news is that the weak version of the adjective is actually grammatically more easy than the strong version. So if you learn the strong versions first and you learn it really well, then it would be really easy to add the weak version later. So for now, let's just avoid putting adjectives next to words that have the greiner. Here is a quick summary of what we went over in this lesson. Press pause and read it at your own pace. During this first exercise, I'm going to ask you to connect the beginning of the sentence with the end of the sentence. Press pause, take all the time that you need, and now I'm going to give you the answer. So here is the result. Press pause so you can go over it at your own speed. I hope you managed to get most of them correctly, so let's just move on to the next exercise. For the next exercise, I want you to fill in the blanks with the word asnalegur, and asnalegur actually means dorky or literally donkey-like, because asni is a donkey. And the beauty of the legur adjectives is that even though you've never heard this word before, now you know how to treat it grammatically. So press pause and take all the time that you need, and I'll give you now the answer. So here are the correct answers. I hope you managed to get as many of them as possible correctly. So now just connect the beginning of the sentences with an appropriate end. Press pause, take all the time that you need, and now I will give you the correct answer. And here you have the correct result. Just press pause and go through it at your own pace. So now let's move on to properly difficult exercise. I'm going to give you a little bit of challenge here. So from the nouns and from the verbs, you should be able to tell what gender the adjectives should be in and whether they should be plural or singular. So just put the adjectives that are now in gray into the sentence in the correct form. And even though you don't understand the noun, and even though you don't understand the adjectives, you should still be able to do this. take your time, press pause, and then I will give you the answer plus the translation. Okay? So now I'm going to assume that you did this and everything is finished, and here comes the result. Since you might not have heard all the words in these sentences, I'm going to read them out for you. Number 1. Álfarnir eru raunverulegir. Number 2. Jólin eru guðdómleg. Number 3. Kvikmyndirnar eru hryllilegar. Number 4. Fólkið alþjóðlegt. And notice here that fólk, which means people, is always a singular word in Icelandic. Always a singular word. Number 5. Tónlistin róleg. And finally, number 6. Söguþráðurinn barnalegur. And as a final exercise, I want you to make your own sentences, okay? So get a pen and paper, or you can write them on the computer, it doesn't matter, and write at least one sentence for every pronoun. And then you can just pick out whatever adjectives that you like. But that's all for the exercises today. Stay tuned for a short spjall. Ef þið ákveðið að ferðast Ísland, þá gott að muna að Ísland getur verið hættulegt. Margt á Íslandi hættulegt. Veðrið getur verið hættulegt, sérstaklega veðrið. Klettarnir, þeir geta verið hættulegir og það eru margar götur sem eru hættulegar eða vegir sem eru hættulegir. En Ísland líka mjög fallegt. Það margir fallegir hlutir á Íslandi. Til dæmis eru mjög margir fallegir fossar, margar fallegar ár og margar fallegar strandlengjur. Svo finnst mér skýin á Íslandi vera einstaklega falleg líka. Svo vonandi fáið tækifæri til þess að ferðast Ísland, farið varlega en njótið fegurðarinnar. Bless, bless!